So, one of the really fun things and one of the really tiring things about a new semester is meeting new people. For myself, I'm an extrovert for the most part until I have 3 kids, but for the most part, I'm an extrovert, and I really like meeting new people. I like getting to know their stories. I like getting to just hear all about what's going on in their lives. But the tiring thing about meeting new people is it doesn't matter how long I've been here at USC, which this is my 30th semester, 30th, yeah, that's right, 30th semester. So at USC, it doesn't matter how long I've been here, every new relationship starts from ground zero. And it doesn't matter how much trust I feel like I've built up over the years with different people, I'm starting off at the same place in the eyes of every new person I meet as every other new person that they meet is, which is ground zero. And trust is really the currency of relationships. Trust is the currency of relationships. So if I want to have healthy relationships that are going well and that aren't bankrupt, then I have to really work hard at building trust in those relationships. And again, it doesn't matter how long I build trust with other people and other relationships. It doesn't matter how trustworthy I think I am. If it's a new person, I have to start afresh and begin to build trust there. And then on top of that, on top of just all the new people, then I have to also figure out how to continue to build and maintain trust in all my current relationships. Whether that's my wife, who I've been married to for a little over 15 years now, or my 3 children, or my family members, or the staff here at Christian Challenge, or you guys, returning students, or people at my church, or people in my neighborhood, all those different locations, I have to continue to work on building trust because all those circles of relationships run on the currency of trust. So whether you're a returning student or whether you're a spring advent this semester, I think you can relate to this dynamic. You have your current friends that you're trying to continue to maintain trust with, and you're also meeting a lot of new people. You have your roommates, your professors, bosses of jobs that you have family members, and then you have the dreaded all semester long group project relationships. And those require a lot of trust. And some of the times they don't turn out too well. But all these relationships, they really function best with trust. Without trust, we don't have a lot of things. Here's a few. Without trust, we don't have goodwill in relationships. People just kind of end up being kind of snarky and cold when there's no trust. Without trust, we're tempted to really fill gaps with suspicion rather than trust. For instance, if you have a friend that you're supposed to meet and there's not trust really in a relationship, or someone you're trying, maybe it's a group project member, and they show up late and there's no trust, the assumption is they're probably lazy. They probably don't care. They're just wasting my time. Rather than maybe assuming maybe they're being held up by something important and they're running behind. Or if you don't have trust in a relationship and you send a text to someone and they're not responsive, the assumption is they're probably just ghosting me. Rather than maybe they're thinking about a reply, or maybe they just haven't answered yet. That could be plausible. Without trust, we don't have influence in the lives of people. Not only do we not influence the lives of people, but when we don't trust other people, we close ourselves off to the influence in their lives, and then influencing us. Without trust, we also find ourselves more susceptible to believing and participating in gossip. I don't know if you've noticed that. I've noticed that for myself. But if we have trust, we can kind of begin to ignore and not participate in gossip. And if we have a question about someone that's being gossiped about, we can just talk to them directly. Without trust, we each find ourselves kind of living in our own individual silos and not able to really fully open up to one another because we're afraid that if we do, there might be hurt because, again, there's no trust. And so we miss out on the intimacy of relationships. And we miss out on the benefits of learning from one another, and we all have to go through the same hard lessons of life by ourselves when we could have learned it from each other if we weren't in our own silos. So it turns out that the ability to really build trust in relationships is really important, especially when you're interacting with lots of new people like you are here at USC. And so thankfully God, in his wisdom, who is the most trustworthy person of all time, he gave us examples and principles to follow in his word that really allow us to really better build our relationships in general, but also to build our relationships in ones that there's really trust as the currency, whether it's new ones or whether it's old ones. So over the next 3 weeks in Challenge, we're going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about different aspects and different principles and situations in the scriptures and really talk about how do you go about building trust. Now, our insight tonight on how to build trust comes from something that the Apostle Paul wrote. The Apostle Paul was formerly known as Saul of Tarsus, if you're not familiar with him. And while he was known as Saul of Tarsus, he hated Christians. And so if you're skeptical about Christianity, Saul of Tarsus was your guy. In fact, he hated Christians so much that he didn't just badmouth Christians. He actually got deputized by the local Jewish religious leaders so that he could go out and round up Christians in various towns and cities and have them thrown in jail or even have some of them put to death. And while he was on one of these, deputized missions to go to the city of Damascus, he gets blinded along the road temporarily, and he finally meets, during this blinding experience, Jesus himself. Now, the very person that he was looking to persecute, he met for the first time. Now, Saul, you can look at that and go, man, what a terrible person. Well, yes and no. He was terrible, but see, he was just incredibly misinformed. You see, he really was a guy that was, in his mind, devoted to God. He just was not convinced that Jesus was God. And so he was set on making sure that no one else thought that or believed that either, until he actually met Jesus. And then when he met Jesus, he was convinced, yep, he's God. And so he went from persecuting followers of Jesus to becoming a follower of Jesus. And then to going around all of the known Mediterranean world, sharing the good news of Jesus and helping others become followers of him too. And one of the places he shared was in the city of Ephesus, which, if you look on the map here, yes, no, well, there you go. Hey, those some points about trust right there. By the way, you can get the later. So, if you look at the map, modern-day Turkey, if you over in the far left side, that is where Ephesus would have been, which would have been on kind of the coastal region of the west side of modern-day Turkey. And so this was a big city. And this city, it was full of, at the time, a lot of worshipers of the Greek goddess Artemis. And I mean, they had a big shrine and temple there. It was a big deal. There was a lot of money to be made, too, in the worshiping of Artemis. They had all these silversmiths that would make these little Artemis statues that they would sell to people so they could have in their homes and worship Artemis, and then they get to go to the shrine that day and stuff like that. But when Paul and his friends brought the good news of Jesus to Ephesus, a lot of people began to turn away from worshiping Artemis, and they began to turn to Jesus. And God worked in some amazing ways, and he did all sorts of miracles through the Apostle Paul's life there at Ephesus. Just wild things, like you have to read about it in Acts chapter 19. He kind of talks about his whole time there, but there's one time even like God was working so powerfully through Paul that a napkin that like Paul wiped his mouth on after eating like pizza or something like that, like they brought that to some sick people in the city, and as the sick people touched it, they got healed of their sicknesses. Like it's crazy stuff like that. But God was just working in amazing ways, probably because I think just the spiritual darkness was just so strong in Ephesus that he chose to do that. But Paul stayed on in Ephesus for 2 years. And then he taught people about how to really walk with Jesus there. And then later on, he began to move to other places. And so at one point, he is in Rome in jail. He's in jail, and so he writes a letter, like he does oftentimes in jail, to the Christians back in Ephesus to begin to encourage them more about and remind them of all the riches and resources they have in Jesus. And to really encourage them to do a couple things, to really live out and to really live up to the life they have been called to by God's grace. Namely, to be followers of Jesus, to really be new creations and new citizens of God's kingdom. Now, towards the end of this letter, this is a little context. So towards the end of this letter, Paul is encouraging the Ephesians to continue. Okay, guys, you're now a different creation. You're no longer that person before. You're this kind of person. So these are some things you need to put off, and these are some things you need to put on in this new life in Christ. And so he gives multiple examples of how to do that. And one of those examples is our key text tonight for how to really begin to build trust and relationships. So it's here in Ephesians 4:29. And this is kind of a main verse that we're going to look at for most of the evening's time. So Paul writes this, he says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. On a side note, by the way, if you ever memorizing verses or you want to get to understand a verse a little better, one of the ways you can really do that is just say the verse over and over and emphasize different words. And as you emphasize different words, different things begin to stick out to you. So I encourage you to do it. So this verse for me, this has really been a big game changer verse in my relationships over the years, especially around the area of building trust. Believe it or not, when I was younger, I had quite the mouth on me. Not so much of a major cussing mouth, although I did my fair share of that too. But more so kind of just a really rude, sarcastic, kind of making fun of others at their expense, keeping the focus all in myself kind of mouth. I was really good at it. I was kind of the king of telling jokes in my friend circles, usually at other people's expense. I'll give one, this is kind of cringeworthy, but to the point that I wouldn't stop when I probably should have stopped. Actually, I probably would have started, but I made a friend of mine in junior high, a guy named Eric, not this Eric, but a guy named Eric cried because I was making fun of the size of his ears for so long to be funny, I just broke down in tears. And I felt terrible. And then with my two brothers, I had two brothers and my sister, but my sister was old enough and I was scared of her, so I didn't make fun of her that much. But my two brothers, it was an art form to just figure out how to push their buttons and how to make fun of them. And the sad thing is, anything that I learned about them, any sensitive information, anything was fair game. And in fact, I made sure I exploited that to the point of making that part of my next joke. And my younger brother in particular really began to kind of resent me for this. He would constantly say when he was younger, was when I'm bigger than you, I'm going to beat you up. Which then I would laugh and say, you're never going to be bigger than me. And I was wrong. He's about 3 inches taller than me. I'm the runt of the litter in my family. And so we'll talk more about that in a second. And so to say that trust and influence and goodwill in our relationship was lower than it could have been was a little bit of an understatement. In fact, one of the greatest regrets probably of my childhood, among several other things, is just the way I treat my younger brother. I so wish I could have gone back and just changed to that. Or just gone back and kicked my own butt. It's what are you doing? But at the time, I was really just too self-focused, too insecure, too unlike and unconnected Jews to really make much of a change. However, as I got to college, I got involved with the college ministry, similar to Christian Challenge like this, where I went at the University of Oklahoma. And I began to kind of work on my mouth and began to make some progress. I began to rebuild some of the trust in my relationship, particularly with my brother, that I had really messed up over the years. Now, I had begun to make some progress in high school, intentionally, but there were still some perspectives on just how to handle my mouth that I really didn't understand or know how to control, and really until a particular conversation that took place at a spring break conference while I was in college with a friend and longtime pastor named Harold Bullock. We were at one of our college ministry spring break conferences, kind of like the one that we're going to be taking up to Hume Lake here in March in a couple months. And I was just talking to Harold over one of the meals, and so I think I asked him something real spiritual, Harold, what's some things I could be really working on to grow? Which, be careful about asking that question, because you just might get some constructive feedback, so be prepared for that. I thought you were just going to say, not much, man, you're awesome. Well, thanks, but really, tell me more. But that's not what he said. What he said, I've never forgotten to this day. I wrote it down, but I pretty much could quote it. But basically he said this, he said, Jeremy, and except he had this very deep voice of Jeremy, and he said, I've known you a long time, and I care about you, and I think you're man enough to hear what I'm going to say, so I'm going to say it. And I was like, where is this going? He said, I think God has given you some leadership ability, And I think God could really use you in the kingdom. But you're too much of a clown. You joke too much, and you don't know when to be serious, and that keeps people from fully trusting you. Because they don't know if they share something important with you, if that's going to be the butt of your next joke or not. So therefore, that keeps people from really trusting you. And then he concluded with this. He said, Jeremy, everyone wants to invite a clown to a party, but no one wants to follow a clown. So you have to decide which one you want to be. And I thought, boy, that stings. Or as Aaron Gillen has coined and said a lot, ouch, that helps. That took me about the better part of 6 months to recover from. But I am so glad that Harold said that to me, because he was right. I was really undermining the trust in my relationships. And I was doing the very thing that Paul talked about in this verse not to do. And I was not doing the very things that Paul talks about in this verse that I should be doing. Every time we speak, we have an opportunity to build up or to tear down. Every time we speak, we have an opportunity to build up or to tear down. Our words, a couple of them word pictures for you. This was a very expensive word picture, or not expensive, but heavy word picture to carry around all day. Our words are really like bricks. Bricks can really be used for really constructive things, like building a house, or building a hospital, or building a fun fireplace like my son and I built in our backyard. This is one of the bricks from that. He said, why are you taking our fireplace? I will put it back. Or it can be used in a really destructive way, like throwing it through a window, or breaking something, or shattering something. Proverbs 12:18 says, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Or to use another illustration, our words are kind of like fire. Now, it depends on how you use it. For instance, in the recent fires that have been taking place around LA, which maybe you guys, this is too much for you right now, but don't worry, I won't hurt myself. But in the recent fires around LA, because the fires were in the wrong place and they were doing the wrong thing, it caused incredible destruction. Incredible. But at the same time, fire can also be constructive. It depends on how it's used. While those fires were taking place, we lost power in our home for about a day. But fire really allowed us to light some candles so we could see where we were going in our house. Fire also really warmed our hot water heater so that we could actually take warm showers, albeit in the dark. And fire allowed us to really cook food over our stove. So our words, just like that, they can be incredibly destructive, or they can be incredibly constructive, depending on how we use them. See, the reason Paul gives such a command as he does in Ephesians 4:29 is because he understands that God has made our words to be very powerful. They can be used to build others up, or they can be used to tear down. Now, a couple years back, I was thinking for one day, I was just thinking, okay, our words are powerful, but why is that? I don't disagree that our words are powerful. I've seen that enough, mostly in negative situations, but I've seen our words powerful. I was like, why are our words so powerful? Why do they carry so much weight? And then I was reading in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 1, and it finally hit me. God spoke. God spoke, and boom, planets were created. God spoke, and boom, galaxies and stars were created. God spoke, and animals and plants and mountains and all these things were created because God spoke. I got a picture for you right here. Who can tell me what this is? Who knows what that is? The Milky Way? That's right. Someone took astrology. Yeah, it's good. Astronomy, not astrology. Astronomy. I actually fell asleep in my freshman year astronomy class because they showed too many pictures and it was dark. But you know what else that is? That's just one of the powerful words of God spoke. Can you imagine the sheer power to be able to just speak and that's what comes out? That's really amazing. See, because God was able to speak and have that kind of power. He was able to create that. And then I went on towards the end of the chapter, and this is when it finally made sense to me. God made mankind in his image. That is why our words have so much power. Because you and I were made in the image of God, and his words have incredible, incredible power. Therefore, our words have incredible power. Now, thankfully, our words do not have so much power as to create and destroy galaxies with the word. I don't think any of us have the character to handle that kind of power just yet, although I think God would eventually like us to. But our words really carry incredible power. Because the one who created us made us in his image, and his words carry incredible power. So if our words carry that much power as image bearers of God, then what Paul commands us to do in Ephesians 4:29 becomes much weightier for our relationships in general, but especially when it comes to building trust in relationships, since trust really is the currency of relationships. So the question is, how do we begin to practically apply this verse to our everyday lives so that we can really build and maintain trust in our relationships and really see our relationships thrive? Well, the first thing Paul commands us to do is he commands us to put off any unwholesome talk. To put off any unwholesome talk. Now that word unwholesome in the original language that is written in, which is Greek, that word really means like rotten or worthless. It was a word they used to describe the smell of fish when they had been sitting in the marketplace too long, and they just began to get warm and they began to stink. You know that smell? Like that was this idea, like unwholesome words, just rotten, smelly words. In terms of our speech, this could include a variety of things. Here's a few of them. Like that could include sarcasm, which there really is no place in relationships for sarcasm, especially when you're dating or you get married or you have little kids. It ruins it. It ruins relationships. So that's a good thing to put off now. Or rude or harsh speech. You know, some people say, well, that's just me. You know, I just like to tell it straight. No, that's called being rude. That's called being harsh. Or crude or off-color jokes. Or really just boastful or self-centered talk where it's all about me. Me. Let me figure out how to get the limelight on myself. That was my problem. Eventually when I began to control my mouth in high school and say less harsh things, I still was all about making her talk about me. Or even just kind of wimpy niceness and flattery. See this verse that Paul's writing, he's not saying, guys, just be nice. Be nice. That's not what he's saying here. Because sometimes it's helpful to others, or what is helpful to others can really sting. You know, if a loving rebuke or some coaching is what someone else really needs, then that's actually the best thing you could do for them. Just like Harold, you know, was courageous and loving enough to tell me what he told me. I didn't particularly enjoy it at the time, and I don't think he enjoyed saying it to me. But that's exactly what I need to hear. And notice, Paul doesn't say to put off some unwholesome talk in this verse. He says to put away all and any unwholesome talk from our mouths. Not just some or most, but all of it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first began to take that verse seriously, I just found myself talking less. Because the majority of the things that came to my mind, that's unwholesome. Funny, but unwholesome. And in fact, even to this day, like for some of you that have been in conversation with me, I used to talk a whole lot faster than I do. And so some of you guys think, why does he talk sometimes a little slower? You have to pause it. It's like, I'm filtering. Because I think, oh my gosh, that could be so funny. That'd be so terrible. And so I just have to filter. Even with my kids sometimes, they'll say something to me and I'll just kind of stare at them like, Don't say that. No, definitely don't say that. Interesting. And so, interesting is usually my filler word until I can figure out what I should say. And you know, for some of you, that may be the very next step you need to have is you just need to talk less. That might be a good place to start. Proverbs 10:19 says this. It says, when words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. What that verse is basically saying, guys, is by pure percentage chance, the more you talk, the more chance you are going to stick your foot in your mouth and sin. So talk less. That was the very first verse on the mouth that I memorized, and it was very helpful. The second thing Paul commands us to do in Ephesians 4:29 is this. He says, only say what is helpful to others, and that's building others up according to their needs. See, this was now in order. Well, I missed this slide. Now, in order to do this, we're going to have to really change our approach to just how we think and how we relate to people in general. We're going to have to really be others-centered and really stop thinking about just what we want to say and think about what do they need. See, that was my problem that Harold really corrected me on. I wanted to change my words, and I had been working on that and made some progress on that since high school, but the root issue was still the problem, which was my words are about me. And so, as much as I wanted to change my words, they were never going to end up really meeting too many needs because they were about me. And how do I appear funny? And how do I get the line on myself? And how do I make people laugh? They weren't really others-centered. I wasn't really thinking about that. And notice, if you're going to be able to figure out people's needs, you're going to have to begin to train yourself to give some forethought before you're interacting with people or when you're interacting with people, and begin to think about, hey, not what do I want to say, but what would really be helpful? What would really meet a need here with my words? And notice it says according to their needs. It says according to their needs. You know, it's easy when you're frustrated with somebody or you're just around people you don't really care for that much. Now, you might see some needs of theirs, but you're not too prone to want to meet those needs because you think, well, they don't deserve that, especially if they have not been very kind and helpful with their words. But see, what Paul is encouraging us to do, he says, don't ask the question, what do they deserve? But really ask the question, what do they need? That's a very different question. Because see, what they deserve might be to get punched in the mouth and told off. That maybe is what they deserve. That's probably what I deserve a whole lot of times. But what they might need might be something like a listening ear. Or they might need a word of encouragement or some light-hearted humor to really brighten up their day. Or maybe they need someone to really take an interest in their day and week because it's been difficult. Or they might even need some help or some advice because they're in a situation they don't know how to handle. Or perhaps they even need, like in my case with Harold, they might even need someone that will have the courage and love them enough to say the hard thing and correct something that's going on in their lives. And the final goal of anything we say must be the other person's benefit. Must be the other person's benefit, not our own. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, or if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're really off the hook on this one. You don't have to do this. In fact, none of the things I've said tonight are commanded to you. When Paul was writing Ephesians 4:29, he was writing to Christians, not to non-Christians. Although I think it'd be really beneficial for your relationships. I think it would help build trust and the relationships in general, but you don't have to do this. But if you are a Christian, this isn't an option. This is a command. This is something that if you decide to follow Jesus and prentice under him, you already signed on to doing this. But the great news is, if you are also a follower of Jesus, you have the power and you are freed up to take this really bold step of really being focusing on the benefits of the person in front of you rather than focusing on what's beneficial to you, because you can trust that Jesus is really going to focus on what's most beneficial for you. And so you're freed up to not have to work about, figuring out your own deal and making sure you look good because God's going to take care of that. We're freed up to build others up with our words rather than tear them down or make our speech really all about us as followers of Jesus. And as we make a habit of being builders with our words, we will also build trust in our relationships. As we make a habit of being builders with our words, we'll also build trust in relationships. Now, I want to just set some appropriate expectations here. This is not real easy. It will take a lot of work to change from being someone who tears down with their words and is very self-centered with their words to being someone who's very other-centered and really builds up with their words. So don't expect that to happen overnight. But that is something that you can start tonight. We will need God's help to do it, but it is worth it. It is so worth it. Now, for those of you who aren't followers of Jesus yet, you may want to attempt to do this as a next step for you, but you might even find that it's maybe even more helpful to back up a step and to do something like this. You may want to get with a Christian friend and ask them how to really begin to better get to know the God who made you and who sent his son to die for you and who rose from the dead and defeated death so that your sins could be forgiven and you could have a restored relationship with him. Because see, until you've entered into a personal relationship with him, until you've really gotten to experience that kind of unconditional love, it's going to be really hard to maintain treating people that way. Because you're going to be operating purely out of your own perspective and power. And for those of you who are thinking about relationships of yours over the course of the night that don't have a lot of goodwill and don't have a lot of trust because of the way you've handled your words in the past, let me encourage you, that can really change. You don't have to start with new relationships and just every couple of years because you burned ones. You can really you can keep the same relationships and just become a builder in those current ones. I mentioned to you how one of my biggest regrets in childhood was just the way I treated my younger brother and the lack of trust that I built and the resentment that I built there. So like I said, when I got to college when I was 18, as a freshman, I began to try to rebuild the trust that I had lost with him and just become a builder with my words. Not just with him, but with all sorts of people. And I didn't do it perfectly, and I messed up a lot along the way, but I kept after it. And I kept after it, and I kept after it, and I kept after it. And on my 30th birthday, 12 years later, he wrote me a note that I wanted to read a short part of, just to encourage you that change is possible in a relationship. And I'm not going to read you the whole note, but I'll just read you the opening paragraph here. He says this, and this is something he gave me. I'm 38 now. I still keep this and look it up on a regular basis. So he said, "This is a little overdue, Jeremy, but hopefully it will not take away any of its significance from me. I am blessed to have you as a brother, and especially an older brother. You have been a real guide and mentor and example for me since high school, really, but not before." And smiley face. And you're on my 18 when it comes to seeking out guidance and advice and wisdom. Few people have brothers that they are as close to, and even more, a blessing to be close to you and truly look up to you as a brother. It's been exciting and more of a challenge to see how your wisdom and love for others has translated into fatherhood for you. So here are just some of the things that I admire about you and try to model after your example, but still need to work on myself. And then he gives a list of those, which I will not read. But I say that to you not to toot my own horn, but just to say, if you had told my brother when I was 18 that he would write a letter like that, he would say, "No chance in hell." There's no way he would have ever said something like that at all. He'd been more likely to probably throw a baseball in my face before writing a letter like that. But, that paragraph, that took 12 years of building for him to say something like that. 12 years. And so, it took a long time, but it was worth it. And so imagine for yourself, 12 years from now, or even 1 year from now, or even one semester from now, where are some of your relationships that are kind of rocky or even just average could be at as you begin to be a builder with your words and you begin to be others focused rather than being someone that tears down or is self-centered with their words? Imagine the trust and the goodwill in your relationships that will begin to be formed with your family and friends and classmates and coworkers. You might actually even enjoy your group projects. It's possible. And imagine just how attractive a Christian life would look to people, the onlooking world, as they begin to see the Christians in this room really begin to handle relationships like that, really begin to think intentionally with their words and think about how can I be a builder with what I'm saying. I think if we just put that habit into practice alone, which hopefully we do a whole lot more than that this semester, I think we'd see a lot of lives change because that is very countercultural. Most of the culture around us is very focused on how do I get ahead with my words? How do I make me look good? How can I be a walking resume? Rather than figure out how can I build others up with my words? How can I really figure out what's in their best interest, what's in their needs? So let me read our main verse for tonight one more time, and then let me pray. Ephesians 4:29 says this. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Any unwholesome talk. But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So I would encourage you, be a builder. And as you're a builder, you're going to build a whole lot more trusting relationships with new people and existing ones, and you will just enjoy your life a whole lot more, and so will they. So let me pray for us, and then we'll invite the band back up. Father, I thank you so much that you are so patient with people like me that took a long, long time to learn the lesson of being a builder. And I'm frankly still learning that in many ways. And just a new stage with my kids and everything else, God. I still have a long time to go in these lessons, God. I do pray, though, that this would be something that would really characterize the relationships of people here at Challenge. That there would just be a joy and a freshness and a goodwill and just a deep-seated trust that's built within this room and also with people all over this campus and all the people that were in our circles of relationships. And that we would be known as very trustworthy people because we are builders. And that is a conscious choice, not just a happenstance that we make each day in each conversation. And that we would really be other-centered and really be thinking about their needs and what do they need, not just what do they deserve. Thank you, God, that you did not just think about what we deserve, but you thought about what we needed and sent your son for us, God. And we are so grateful for that. And we pray that we would treat people even half the way you treated us and really imitate you as our Father. I pray this in Jesus' name.